Welcome back. So this is the first video of this section, and in this video we are going to discuss that what is backend development and how it works basically. Okay, so this section basically contains 3 to 4 videos in which we will cover about the introduction to the backend development. So I'm not going to bore you with the too much content. I am just going to give you to the point information about the backend development so that you can understand each and everything clearly. Okay, so let's start it. First of all, what is backend development? The backend development is the part that we cannot see. It is the internal working or the behind the scenes of the application or the website. This includes stuff like the server, database, etc. So basically backend development means the stuff that is going on back of the website that every user cannot see. Only developers can see that and modify that. For example, the coding running on the server side or the interaction between the database is done in the backend development. So this is what we call the backend development. Now let's discuss the workflow of the development, that why we cannot see the backend of the website. For example, we have a backend on our website written in Node.js, Express and MongoDB. Okay, so this is the wall between the front end and the backend of the website. Now users cannot see behind this line. Okay, they cannot see the backend coding or the backend stuff of the website. Next, we have the front end part, which is the HTML, CSS and JavaScript, which is connected to the backend coding. Okay, and next we have our web page or website that user sees on the laptop or computer screen. So this wall basically divides the front end and the backend development. The backend development is hidden from the users. So this is the basic workflow of a website. There are a lot of stuff that goes on between them. There are protocols, HTTP protocol or TCP/IP protocol that we are going to discuss in our next video. And also we will discuss that how a complete website works in detail in our third video. Okay, so this is the basic workflow of the development. Next, what actually the backend developers do? First of all, they write the server-side code. Server-side code means the backend code that control the working of that website. So the backend developer writes the server-side code. Next, they write code to interact with the database, like we are going to use the MongoDB in this course. Okay, so definitely when we create a website, we are going to store some data in the database permanently so that we can use it later. So the backend developers write that code that interact with that database. And we are also going to write some code in this course that definitely interact with the database, that is MongoDB. Next, they ensure that server-side code is secure and free of bugs. Now when they write the code, they basically test the server-side code that it is secure and free of bugs. Definitely we cannot allow our users to get access to the backend or server-side code, so that they ensure that our server-side code is secure and free of bugs. Okay, and next they ensure that the server-side code is optimized enough to handle large volume of traffic. Okay, for example, a website is getting a bunch of traffic from search engine or directly from other sources. So the backend developers optimize the server-side code enough that they can handle large volume of traffic or large volume of users. They ensure that the website does not crash when a lot of users come to that website. Okay, at the end they also deploy the code web online so that other people can use it. They are also responsible to deploy the website or the code which is written on the server side so that other users can see it on the internet. So this is what a backend developer do. Now what languages and technologies we can use at the backend of a website? Okay, so there are a bunch of technologies or languages that we can use to write backend of our website, like PHP, which is one of the most old and popular technology. Next, Java, Python, Ruby, C# and JavaScript, which is Node.js, we are going to use in this course. Okay, so there are several technologies. These are one of the most popular technologies that we can use at the backend of the website, but in this course we are going to use the Node.js or JavaScript as backend of our website. Okay, so this is the basic introduction to the backend development. In our next videos, we are going to discuss about the protocols like HTTP protocol or HTTPS protocol, and also we will discuss about the TCP/IP protocol, that are basically the protocols for data communication on the internet. Okay, and after that we will discuss that how a complete website works in detail, and also we will look at the static websites versus dynamic websites in this section. So that's it for this video. If you feel any problem in understanding anything about backend development, you can definitely ask me a question or message me. I am always here to help you. So I will see you in the next video. Welcome back. So today in this video we are going to discuss about different protocols that are involved in the data transmission of a web page. Okay. So first of all, we are going to discuss about the TCP/IP. TCP stands for Transmission Control Protocol and IP stands for Internet Protocol. Okay. So before getting into the HTTP or HTTPS protocols, it would be a better idea to discuss about TCP and IP at first. Okay. So TCP/IP uses the client-server model of communication in which a user is provided a service like a web page by another computer in our network. So TCP/IP specifies how data is exchanged over the internet by providing end-to-end communications that identify how it should be broken into packets, addressed, transmitted, routed, and received at the destination. Now, Transmission Control Protocol and Internet Protocol are two types of protocol that are used in the data communication. So it basically tells that how data is exchanged over the internet. First of all, what happens here is our data is broken down into packets, and then these packets are given a unique address. And then we will transmit these packets to the specified address, then it is received and packed again at the destination. Basically, Transmission Control Protocol contains 4 layers that are physical layer, application layer, network layer, and transport layer. Okay, so we are not going to discuss about all these layers in this video. I just want to give you a touch about the TCP and IP protocol. Okay, so basically these are the internet protocols or communication or data communication protocols that basically decides that how data will be exchanged over the internet. Okay, so this is the basic idea of the TCP and IP. Now let's discuss about the HTTP protocol. Okay, so HTTP protocol means Hypertext Transfer Protocol. HTTP is the underlying protocol used by the World Wide Web. HTTP offers set of rules, standards which govern how any information can be transmitted on the World Wide Web. HTTP provides standard rules for web browsers and servers to communicate. HTTP is an application layer protocol which is built on the top of the TCP. Okay, HTTP protocol is the protocol which is used by the World Wide Web, or internet uses the HTTP protocol. Basically, HTTP defines some rules and standards that how information is transmitted over the World Wide Web or the websites. Okay, so it defines some rules that how server communicates with the web browsers. Now, HTTP application layer is built on the top of the TCP, which is the Transmission Control Protocol, which we have discussed in our previous slide. So this is the HTTP protocol. Next, we have the HTTPS protocol. HTTPS protocol stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. It is highly advanced and secure version of HTTP. It uses the port number 443 for data communication. It allows the secure transactions by encrypting the entire communication with the SSL. Okay, so HTTPS is the basically the version of the HTTP protocol, but this is the secure version. Okay, now the HTTP protocol is built on the port number 40, and HTTPS uses the protocol 443. 443 protocol means the HTTP protocol that uses the SSL. Okay, now what does this means? That it allows the secure transaction by encrypting the entire communication with the SSL. Let's discuss it with the help of an example. Now I have taken this image from the internet from guru99.com. This is a very good example to understand this concept of HTTP and HTTPS. Now you can see that if a website is using HTTP protocol, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, now whenever a password is used, then a hacker can see that password straight away without any trouble. But when we will use the HTTPS, which is the secure version of the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, then our password will be not saved as it is encrypted first and then saved. For example, you can see that Guru99 password is encrypted to this gibberish text. Okay, so now hacker can see that gibberish text, not see the original password. So this is the major difference between the HTTP and HTTPS, which is the secure protocol. Okay, so now let's discuss about some key difference between these protocols. First of all, HTTP uses the port number 80 by default and HTTPS use port 443 by default. HTTP website does not use encryption. As you can see in the previous slide, we have discussed that HTTP does not encrypt our data like passwords, but HTTPS uses the encryption for our data and make it more secure. Okay. And next, HTTP definitely is not a secure protocol, and HTTPS is a very secure protocol as it uses the encryption to protect our data from the hackers. At the end, now HTTP does not scramble the data to be transmitted. That's why there is a higher chance that information is available to the hackers. Scramble means that our data is not converted into a different shape. For example, as we take on the example of the password. In HTTP, the password is saved as it is, but in HTTPS, the password is saved in the encrypted form. Okay, when we transmit our data, the hypertext transfer protocol does not mix up the data and pass that data straight away. So there is a higher chance that hackers can hack our data. But in the case of HTTPS protocol, HTTPS scrambles data before transmission. At the receiver end, it descrambles to recover original data. Therefore, information is secure from hackers. So definitely HTTPS is more secure than HTTP protocol, because first scrambles the data, mix up that data, change the form of that data, and when it is received at the receiver, then it will be descrambled to get our original data. So in this way, we will save our data from the hackers. So these are the major difference between the HTTP and HTTPS. I hope that you understand now why all big websites uses the HTTPS hypertext transfer protocol secure on their websites, because those websites are secure and want to protect their data from the hackers. Also, this increase your security and the ranking of your website. I hope that you understand what is the major difference between the HTTP and HTTPS protocol. So in this video, we have discussed all about the protocols TCP, IP, HTTP and HTTPS. I hope that you understand. In our next video, we are going to discuss about that how a complete website works. So I will see you in the next video. Welcome back. In our previous video, we had discussed about the protocols, and now in this video, we will discuss about how a complete website works. So let's see. First of all, we have a user that uses the internet to get a web page or a website. Okay. So first of all, a user open its browser and type a URL in the browser. For example, HTTPS, which is secure protocol, www.google.com. Okay. User wants to get this web page on its browser screen. Okay. So what happens is, when user open the browser, enter the URL in the browser and press the enter, a request is sent to the DNS server. Now what is DNS server? DNS server is domain name server. Okay. So www.google.com is our domain name. Now www.google.com is not the actual address of the Google. The actual address of this Google is some IP address behind this domain name. Okay. You can take the example of your phone book to understand this. Okay. You have a number of a person named John and you will save it in your phone book with the name John. Okay. So when you search for a user or person John, you are not going to get John. You are going to get the contact number of John. In the same way, when we will type www.google.com, we are actually calling the IP address behind this google.com domain. Okay. So DNS server translates the domain to its original IP address, that is 216.58.211.110. When you will type this IP address in your browser URL part, you are going to get the google.com official homepage. Okay. So this is DNS server, domain name server, which actually converts your domain name into IP address. And after that, the request is sent to the main server with that IP address. And www.google.com homepage or this official homepage will be generated on the server, and then it will be sent to the client. And in this way, we will access the website. So this is the complete working of our website. I repeat it once again. First of all, a user open its browser, type a URL in it. A request is sent first of all to the DNS server, domain name server. The domain name server converts www.google.com domain to its original IP address. Because google.com is not the address of a server, IP address is the address of that server. Okay, after that, request is sent to the main server, and then server renders or process that page and then send back that page as a response to the client, and then it is displayed on the screen of your browser. So this is the working of the complete website. I hope that you understand. Now there are two types of websites, static websites and dynamic websites, and we are going to discuss about them in our next video. And also we've discussed about something called APIs in our next video. Okay, so that's it for this video. I will see you in the next video. Welcome back. So today in this video we will discuss about the static websites versus dynamic websites. So let's see it. First of all, we have static websites. The static websites are the websites that has plain HTML, CSS or JavaScript, or you can say that only the front end. For example, we have our HTML, CSS and JavaScript, and this all forms a web page or a website. Okay, there is no processing on the back end. Simply we save our static pages on the server, and server return those pages as a response to us as they are, as we save them in the server. Nothing is changed, everything is static. Static websites are simple. For example, a portfolio site is a static website because the user data is always static, that is not going to change. Okay, so this is the example of the static websites like a portfolio. Next we have dynamic websites, which are most important one. Okay, in dynamic websites the data changes every time. For example, if you go to the Facebook, when you log in to your Facebook account, every time you refresh your Facebook page, you will see different results, different images and different videos on the pages. So that type of website is called the dynamic websites. So what happens is we have a database where our all data is stored of a website. Then on the server side, with the help of that database, we will build a web page on the server side, and then that web page is sent to the front end part or the client side, and then that build website will be converted into HTML, CSS and JavaScript, and at the end it will be displayed on the screen, which is our web page. So these types of websites are called the dynamic websites. In dynamic websites, the processing is done on the server side of the application, and simply we are converting our data into the HTML, CSS and JavaScript on the front end and displaying it on the screen. So this is the dynamic websites. Now the major difference between static website and dynamic website is that on static website there is no processing on the backend. We are not rendering or building any page on the backend, while in dynamic websites we are processing our website on the backend because our data changes dynamically. We have our database, so every time we get a different and dynamic page on our screen. As I give you example of the Facebook, each time we refresh our Facebook profile or Facebook page, we are going to get different images and videos on the homepage of the Facebook. Now you may got a question in your mind that why I have put down the JavaScript in the front end or static part, because on the front end JavaScript just performs some type of animation or other stuff, but I am talking about the dynamic in another aspect. I am talking about the dynamic in terms of data. Okay, so in these type of dynamic websites, the data is being fetched from the database, and every time we're going to get the different result, and this forms our dynamic website. Now in this type of dynamic website, we are rendering our web page or building our web page on the server side. But there is another type of dynamic website in which we process our web page or render our web page on the front end of the development. Okay, so that is called the API. API stands for Application Program Interface. What we will do is we get data from the database, we simply process that data and send that data in the form of JSON. We are not going to send the data in form of HTML, CSS or JavaScript. We are going to send data in form of JSON, and with that JSON data we can build our own application or build our own web page on the front end of the application. That's why API is mostly used in these days, because we are sending our data from the back end to front end in form of JSON. So we are not sending data in form of HTML, CSS or JavaScript from the front end. We are sending our data in form of JSON format. Okay, So what we will do is we can simply then convert and use that JSON data and organize our data and show it in form of web page, or we can also use that JSON data to use it in our Android app, iOS app, desktop application, or web app, whatever we want. But in the previous type of dynamic website, in which we are rendering our web page on the backend, we are sending data in form of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and then simply display it on the web page. But in APIs, we are simply sending our data in form of JSON format, and then we can use that data in any way we want. In any platform, we can use that JSON data, like Android app, iOS app, desktop application, or a web application. Okay. So I hope that you understand the difference between the static websites, dynamic websites, also in terms of the API. Now API is a very huge topic, and it cannot be covered in the same course. Okay. So this course is not focused on APIs. This is only focused purely on Node.js, MongoDB, and Express. Okay. And I will create a separate course for APIs, and we will build some real world projects using the APIs. Okay. So I hope that you understand the difference between the static websites and dynamic websites. So this is the end of this section. Now I hope that you have better understanding about these websites, backend, or protocols that we have discussed in this section. And now we are good to go towards the Node.js. Okay, so I will see you in the next section.